Dear President of the United Nations General Assembly, Abdullah Saeed, Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, honorable ministers, excellencies, heads of states and governments, distinguished delegates, and members of the global community. I thank you for this opportunity to convene this conversation on the relevance of ocean to human health and the corresponding importance of Sustainable Development Goal 14 to the other Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, Sustainable Development Goal 3 to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. I'd like to thank the members of our organizing committee for their contributions to this event, including the American Geophysical Union, the European Marine Board, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, the Soufreda Foundation Maroc, Medical Impact, the Ocean Suez Alliance, the Pew Charitable Trusts, the UNESCO Sustainability Chair at the University of Sao Paulo, Surfers Against Sewage, University College Dublin, the University of Bergen, University of Plymouth Marine Institute, the University of Sydney, the University of West Indies, Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and my own institution, University of Alabama at Birmingham School of Public Health. I'd also like to give additional thanks to Christopher Sima, who was the webinar technical lead. He runs the instructional technology group at the University of Alabama at Birmingham School of Public Health. To Michael Milley, who did the graphic design for this presentation. To Quentin Bouvier, who did the French translations. To Jacob Kohlhoff, Balin Bennett, Hugh Rowland, and Jake Seegers, all of whom contributed to the video clips that we will be showing momentarily. As an overall disclaimer, except where explicitly noted, all remarks are opinions of the respective speakers and not necessarily endorsed by any institutions or by any other speakers. And now I would like to hand the floor to a panel of expert voices in this oceans and human health space, who will go on to discuss how the ocean is critically important for human health and how both SDG 14 and the other SDGs are necessary for the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. And with that, here we go.
Hello, my name is Annika Jerlinga, and I'm a Scientific Program Officer at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, or NIEHS, of the United States National Institutes of Health. The mission of the NIEHS is to discover how the environment and the chemicals therein impact human health. The ocean is an important aspect of our environment, and I'll take this opportunity to highlight some of the ways that NIEHS provides funding opportunities for institutions to conduct research to study waterborne toxins and pollutants in the ocean. NIEHS's interest in ocean topics encompass several priorities, which can vary drastically between regions. For one, the ocean is rife with anthropogenic exposures. Metals, chemical contaminants, agricultural runoff, and microplastics or tire wear particles are all exposures of concern. Additionally, there are harmful algal blooms, HABs, and other natural toxins, which plague both marine and freshwater. These exposures can impact health through direct exposure, disruption of the food chain, or by impacting water quality, among other things. Other priorities are understanding the additional burden of extreme weather events found along the coast, such as hurricanes and flooding, and contextualizing research by considering local population susceptibilities. Spanning all of these topics is, of course, climate change. It makes these situations worse and less predictable, and all the more urgent to address. Our biggest program addressing these concerns is the Centers for Oceans and Human Health Initiative. There have been 3 generations of centers co-funded by the National Science Foundation. The thesis is to promote interdisciplinary collaborations among biomedical researchers, physical and oceanographic scientists, and community partners. This spiral figure is a visual walk through the most prevalent topics covered by the ocean centers over the years, but regrettably, I do not have time to cover it in detail. This map shows currently active awards from the most recent OHH iteration. We have a nice geographic and scientific distribution, contributing to a variety of types of toxins and pollutants covered. Briefly, examples of projects funded under the OHH initiative are those that are developing techniques for more accurate and earlier detection of HABs, examining the health effects of consuming seafood containing pollutants, identifying mechanisms of toxicity for waterborne pollutants, and determining how climate change affects the frequency and toxicity of HABs and Vibrio events. The full impact of the centers actually comes from partnerships with community groups. Working with local partners, examples of which are listed on this slide, significantly increases success and speeds up the development of strategies to adapt or counteract, prevent, and protect from exposures. Each of our centers has a community partnership component to facilitate the translation of data into policy or community level education and prevention or mitigation strategies. So before I wrap up, I'd like to go over a few opportunities for any research groups out there who might be interested. Outside of the centers, NIH has a large number of research funding opportunities to which you may be able to apply, from shorter 2-year awards to standard 5-year grants. We also have fellowships and career awards meant for graduate students, postdoctoral researchers, and early career scientists. The NIEHS runs a time-sensitive research program for instances in which an event has or will imminently occur, providing a limited window of opportunity to collect samples and data needed to support the assessment of exposure or human health impact. Qualifying events include, but are not limited to, hurricanes, wildfires, and chemical spills. Finally, the Centers for Oceans and Human Health was approved for a renewal, and we will be releasing a funding opportunity announcement in the coming months to recompete for new centers. If you have any questions about these opportunities or would like to learn more, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you so much for your time.
Good day. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and to Dr. Matt Gribble for providing it, and to the UN as well for allowing me to speak about one of my favorite subjects, oceans and human health, in particular, how I would like to focus on the benefits and opportunities that are offered to human health and well-being from interacting with a healthy ocean. When we think about the ocean in terms of a sort of ecosystems framework, there are lots of benefits, not all of them known to many people around the world. So much of the oxygen that we breathe, our climate regulation, things like transport, recreation, and a huge portion of the economy globally is dependent on a healthy ocean. But when we tend to talk about oceans and human health and how oceans can impact on human health and well-being, there is a focus on the risks, and you've heard many of them in these recent talks. So there's obviously climate change with attendant floods and associated also ocean acidification. There's the harmful algal bloom organisms and their toxins and their contamination potentially of seafood food chain. There's also obviously global fisheries destruction, both in marine and freshwater environments, and microbial pollution coming off of the land into the water, and associated with that, antimicrobial resistance. And finally, all the man-made chemicals, including but not exclusively plastics, that have entered up in the oceans and contaminated our ocean systems and made our ocean environments much less healthy, and in turn, much less healthy for human beings. I've had the benefit as a physician and epidemiologist working at the European Center for Environment and Human Health to be able to study some of the benefits that having interactions with healthy marine and coastal environments can have for our human health and well-being. And these include seafood and, of course, attendant to that, aquaculture, providing essential proteins and nutrients that can prevent chronic diseases. Also, a host of modeling and forecasting systems, such as early warnings for tsunamis and for cyclones. And of course, marine natural products, which even now range from such things as chemotherapy agents to the potential for alternatives to plastics or even new antibiotics. And of course, there is the promise of marine renewable energy possibly replacing our dependency on harmful fossil fuels. And finally, there is now a host of information and evidence demonstrating that when we are able to have equitable access to high quality marine and coastal environments, that these can be good in terms of both preventing chronic disease and in promoting physical health and mental well-being in human and other populations. these are some references and other sources of information, including a future Oceans and Human Health book that will be published in June 2023. And again, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Susan Lozier, President of the American Geophysical Union, or AGU. Thank you to the organizers who invited me to join this discussion. I am so impressed by the breadth of perspectives gathered virtually here. Scientists, policymakers, and community leaders from all around the world coming together to discuss the challenges and vital solutions to sustaining our oceans and health. As a physical oceanographer, I have spent most of my life studying ocean circulation and the impact of ocean physics on marine ecosystems and on our changing climate. My research experience has taught me the value of interdisciplinary collaboration, a practice which is more important now than ever. When it comes to facing the challenges of climate change, as well as responding to the charge of the Sustainable Development Goals, it's all hands on deck. There is no doubt that human-caused climate change and pollution are affecting the oceans and Earth systems. Unfortunately, the impact of these changes poses a threat to human and ecological health, marine life, economic well-being, and global security. Furthermore, many of these climate risks will disproportionately impact marginalized or already vulnerable communities and individuals. The science affirms the need for collective action to substantially reduce the release of carbon dioxide by transitioning to more efficient sources of energy. And while discovery should remain at the heart of any scientific endeavor, we need a focus on effective solutions to these shared challenges. At AGU, we've been fostering scientific collaboration for over 100 years. We support a global community of 130,000 individuals, from enthusiasts to experts in Earth and space science. 2 years ago, AGU developed a new strategic plan with goals focused on discovery science and on solutions to scientific and societal challenges. To meet those goals, AGU is committed to expanding transdisciplinary science, open science, and open data while maintaining high standards of quality and scientific integrity. In 2017, AGU launched a transdisciplinary journal and section called GeoHealth, which is focused on the complex interactions between the environment and human health, well-being, and populations. Importantly, GeoHealth's purview includes the health of our ocean ecosystems and the communities that live along our coastlines. GeoHealth is just one example of how AGU has encouraged our members to collaborate on projects with experts in vastly different fields like medicine, engineering, sociology, and economics. We've also found ways to connect scientists directly with local communities through initiatives such as the Community Science Exchange and the Thriving Earth Exchange. These programs partner members of the scientific community with hundreds of community leaders around the world to solve local challenges and share those learnings widely and openly. Developing enduring solutions to the SDGs and climate change on any scale requires a broad network of engagement. Community science, which is an inclusive approach to solving local issues, including for coastal communities, does just that. I am so glad to see that people of different backgrounds have gathered here today to talk about one of my favorite subjects, the ocean. There's no doubt that it will take all of our voices and skills to make a difference. None of us can do it alone. We'll need to work together. On behalf of AGU, we look forward to continuing this conversation here at the conference and beyond.
Hello, everybody. My name is John Newton. I'm Professor of Public Health and Epidemiology at the University of Exeter, and I'm also Director of Public Health Analysis for the English Public Health Agency working for the British government. I'm interested in the effect of oceans on health, and I've also been working for many years in epidemiology, looking at how we can express all risks and outcomes together in measures sometimes referred to as burden of disease approach. Now, we know that oceans have many different influences on health, both positive and sometimes negative. And these are often assessed individually. But what we've been trying to do is look at the various relationships between oceans and health and try and integrate these into some holistic measures that give us some idea of the importance that oceans have in our overall health. And this is really the approach of burden of disease. I just wanted to mention this to you to say it's at a very early stage, but we hope it'll help to understand and put into context this very important relationship between oceans and health. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Henrik Ennevoldsen. I'm the acting head of the Ocean Science section at UNESCO's Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. We're the UN agency for ocean research, and as such involved in a number of activities dealing with ocean health and human health. There is increasing recognition and understanding of the reliance of humankind on the vital life-supporting services provided by the ocean. The high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy considers the ocean a source of solutions for climate change mitigation and for many dimensions of sustainable ocean economy, including the future of food and energy. The ocean also furnishes unquantifiable aesthetic, cultural, and recreational services that are essential to human well-being. This nexus between a healthy ocean and human health is at the core of the UN Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. In fact, one of the expected outcomes of the decade, the one on a clean ocean where sources of pollution are identified and reduced or removed, recognizes that society generates a vast range of pollutants, contaminants, such as marine debris, plastic, excess nutrients and noise, hazardous chemicals, toxins, and heavy metals. And these pollutants and contaminants derive from a wide variety of land and sea-based sources, including point and non-point sources. And the resulting pollution is unsustainable for the ocean, and it jeopardizes ecosystems, human health, and livelihoods. It will therefore be critical to fill urgent knowledge gaps and generate priority interdisciplinary and co-produced knowledge on the causes and sources of pollution and what the effects are on human health and the ecosystems. This knowledge will underpin solutions co-designed by multiple stakeholders to eliminate pollution at the source and manage harmful activities, remove pollutants from the ocean, and support our transition into a healthy circular economy. Another expected outcome of the decade is a productive ocean, supporting sustainable food supply and sustainable ocean economy. The ocean is the foundation for future global economic development and human health and well-being, including food security and secure livelihoods for hundreds of millions of the world's poorest people. Knowledge and tools to support the recovery of wild fish stocks, deploy sustainable fisheries management practices, and support the sustainable expansion of agriculture while protecting essential biodiversity and ecosystems will be essential. Again, government will require information tools, for example, through national accounts that incorporate ocean indicators. Therefore, one of the 10 key challenges of the UN Decade of Ocean Science is to understand and map land and sea-based sources of pollutants and contaminants and their potential impact on human health and ocean ecosystems, and not the least, to develop solutions to remove or mitigate them. The Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO is engaging in the UN Decade with actions that address these challenges to both a healthy ocean and to human health. And we wish to join forces with all stakeholders doing the same. We have no more time to wait to take action. Join the decade. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Chris Whitehead, and I'm going to be talking about the Southeast Alaska Tribal Ocean Research Network. CEDAR is a network of 16 tribal organizations across Southeast Alaska that focus on paralytic shellfish toxins as well as other climate change impacts. Today, we're going to be discussing the pathway of toxicity and how the tribes have begun managing their own climate change projects based around HABs and shellfish toxins. So this is just a graph of how a pathway of toxicity is passed from the Alexandrium cells into the shellfish, and then they can be consumed by shellfish harvesters. So the tribes have really focused on building programs with these three pillars in mind. Number one is phytoplankton observations, and then testing tissues in a laboratory at the Sitka tribe of Alaska, and then communicating those results back to harvesters. So the first pillar is each of the communities select a harvest location, and they go out and do a net tow to identify, using microscopy, the phytoplankton species that are there and locating those HAB species that we're concerned about. They also take salinity and sea surface temperature and whole water sampling for shellfish cellular toxicity. All those data are then entered in the database, and then those results are communicated back to partners. Also, shellfish are collected at each of those sites and sent to the laboratory in Sitka, where they are run for, depending on what toxicity or toxin they're looking for, either paralytic shellfish toxins or domoic acid. Then those data are then shared via a listserv and also posted on a web portal where community members can realize those data and make decisions on whether or not they should be harvesting shellfish at that time. Some of the data over the last handful of years show really elevated levels of paralytic shellfish toxins. So the red line shows the FDA regulatory limit of 80 micrograms per 100 grams of shellfish tissue. And you can see a lot of those data points from community samples all over Southeast were well above that. And to note, in 2019, we saw levels of over 10,000 micrograms, which are lethal levels. Nobody got sick from any of these since we started doing this project. And so it just goes to show that the subsistence community is looking for these results and waiting to harvest based on these test results. So just a list of funding sources and partners that we've collaborated with, and please reach out if you have any questions.
Hello, I am Alexander Turra, professor at the Oceanographic Institute of University of São Paulo in Brazil and coordinator of the UNESCO Chair on Ocean Sustainability. To talk about the role of oceans to support human health, we need to understand what ocean health means, because the health of the ocean is completely and strongly linked with health of humans or health of society. When we talk about ocean health based on Ben Halpern's studies, we incorporate the logic of a clean ocean, an ocean without pollution, without threats, but also an ocean that can be used and can promote prosperity. So if we have both, we can have a role, or we can optimize the role of the ocean to spill over, so influence society in different ways. That's the point that makes ocean so important to society and makes SDG 14 strategically inserted into a process to transform society in the direction of sustainable development, because considering the ocean, we can face or we can fight against poverty, against hunger. We can promote good health and well-being in the society, including the elimination of the ocean or environmental racism. We can produce affordable and clean ocean. So also talking about SDG 7, and through the capacity of the ocean to regulate the climate, we can keep the conditions that support agriculture and other activities like tourism, and also influence life on land, since life on land depend on these climatic and weather conditions. So the ocean is a central engine of what happens in society. But the ocean, sometimes we can understand that the ocean is unhealthy, and it's unhealthy because society is unhealthy. And the more unhealthy the ocean is, this will influence society too. So we need to keep the ocean clean, working, functioning in a healthy way, so that we can help society to transform into the direction of the sustainable development.
Hello, my name is Antonio, and I'm part of Surfrider Foundation Europe. Surfrider Europe is an environmental NGO that belongs to an international network present in several continents in the world. For 30 years, Surfrider Europe has been taking action as a recognized authority in 3 areas of expertise: marine litter, coastal management and climate change, and water quality and health. And today I'm here to share with you our latest work about water quality that is manifesto for bathing and recreational water quality in Europe. The water quality is regulated in the perspective of bathing water is regulated through a directive, a European directive that was first published in 1976. And since then, it was just one revision that was in 2006. And since the creation of Surfrider Europe, we have been influencing and working on this directive since the 90s. And through these days, we gained a lot of experience and critique about the work and the appliance of this directive and the impact that it had on the environment and on the person. So in 2020, when they decided to launch the revision of the directive, we decided to also to work next to our volunteers, to our community, but also with our partners into the creation of specific contributions to this revision. And we find five demands that are the base of this manifesto for healthy waters. First, including new parameters. We believe that the revised directive must incorporate additional parameters: marine litter, harmful algae bloom and cyanobacteria, and chemical pollution. Our second claim is the improvement of the information on water quality for the users. For one hand, improve the public information through the online access, transparency, clarity, but also in the harmonization and standardization of the information provided to the public in the European scale. Our third claim, our third demand, it's related with the monitoring scope. Because we are surfers and because we came from a community of surfers, we are very focused in the health of the users. So we believe that they should extend the water quality control to leisure and water sport areas and not just to bathing water areas. And remember that in Europe, bathing water areas just exist during summer or during some period in summer. So that is very important to us. And that takes us to the second claim in the scope, that is monitoring the water quality through the whole year, because we have users on the water all year. We never stop surfing, at least if the conditions are good. But this is really crucial to us. Our fourth claim is the strength of public participation. First, in the list of the bathing waters areas, what is the areas that they should be part of this list? Consult regularly representatives of water sports communities. Extend also the consultation to European citizens to new areas covered by the directive. For example, identification of pollution and research for solutions on these areas. And also support citizen science projects, as we have with our volunteers that are on the field and work actively in this protective. And the fifth claim is align all policies which concern water quality and the marine environment, because the truth is that in the practice on the field, we have a lot of regulations being applied. So we need to align these policies and the way they act through the community. The Water Framework Directive, Marine Strategy Framework Directive, and different directives that are connected, like the Wastewater Treatment Directive, etc. And it is very important because it will help us to limitate the appliance of this directive, but also guarantee a better efficiency in the perspective of the environment and the user. And if you want to know more about this, we will share with you all the information about our manifesto. And we just have to be thankful to the 50 organizations that join us on this manifesto and enforce our message through the European Commission. So thank you, and I am available for any questions that you have.
Hi everyone, I am Karen Madarcos. I, together with my mentor, the case study leader of the Blue Communities Philippines, Dr. Lota Creencia, with whom I am sharing this presentation, live and work in the island province of Palawan in the Philippines. This province is a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve owing to its unique and rich biodiversity. We are from the Western Philippines University, and we would like to take this opportunity to share findings and insights from our research from the Blue Communities. We believe that these researches are useful not only for a small tropical island like ours, but also for those who wish to have a healthier people and ocean around the world. Palawanos' lives are deeply intertwined with the ocean. Coastal communities are dependent on the ocean for their food, livelihood, health, and well-being. We interact with the ocean through fishing, post-harvest, recreation, shellfish foraging, coastal management, and aquaculture activities. The coastal ecosystem also protects us from strong waves and wind, sequestrates carbon, and provides large amount of oxygen. We eat fresh fish more than 6 days a week, go fishing 4 days a week, and sell fish and other produce 3 days a week. The coast and the sea provide us with a sense of place, bring good memories when we are away, and teach and inspire us to have a better future. Generally, the mangrove forest in Palawan increased by 8.6% from 2013 to 2020. And based on the Markovian modeling analysis, the mangrove areas here will likely increase more in 2030. People here believe that the mangrove and seagrass coverage, seaweed farming, and aquaculture will be better in 10 years. But these are threatened and we are vulnerable. People perceive that the occurrence of harmful algal bloom and the use of agrochemicals will increase in the next 10 years. The quality of seawater, sewage, and the quantity of shellfish and wild fishes will be in a bad condition as well in the next 10 years. These risks are brought about by climate change and man-made interventions, such as unsustainable and destructive fishing and farming practices, urbanization related to overpopulation, use of agrochemicals, and marine plastic litter. Our beaches are dirty based on the Clean Coast Index. Materials from fishing gears and plastic food packaging are the leading types of plastic litter. During the pandemic, discarded face masks also litter our beaches. Coastal people agree that our climate is changing. This is manifested in temperature rise, excessive rainfall, sea level rise, and floods. It affects our livelihood, income, and health. If we want to sustainably benefit from our coast and the ocean, we must make our ocean governance innovations more participative, inclusive, and data-driven. We must build informed and involved communities. Invest in people and create systems where stakeholders can work together to pursue the agenda on life below water. Thank you.
Good day. My name is Dr. William Burkhart, and I serve as the Director of the Division of Seafood Science and Applied Technology at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration Centers for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. This brief presentation is to describe the necessity of protecting our oceans and coastal estuaries to ensure the safe production of seafood. Specifically, I will describe the impact that municipal water discharges may have on the sanitary quality of shellfish and shellfish-grown waters. On this slide, we find a compiled data from the CDC that describes the majority of infectious shellfish-borne illnesses that occur in the United States. Illness types generally fall into two categories: viruses, primarily norovirus, and bacteria, vibrios. I need to be specific here that these illnesses are attributed primarily to Vibrio perimylicus and Vibrio vulnificus. We are not speaking about pandemic strains of Vibrio cholera. Of the remaining 25% or so of the outbreaks, we find that they are often most associated with fecal contamination. This slide depicts the general cycle of norovirus infection in relation to shellfish safety. This virus is of fecal-oral transmission. For purpose, we will start with an ill individual, followed by waste treatment, environmental discharge of that materials, contamination of shellfish growing areas, whereby there's bioaccumulation by the shellfish, there's a harvest, and then consumption of that potentially contaminated product. This virus is very infectious and environmentally stable. Making things worse is that mollusk and shellfish are filter feeders and can concentrate viruses 100-fold of what is in the water column. The connection between ocean and human health becomes apparent from this slide. Wastewater treatment plants often discharge their waste into estuaries or near shore. The challenge is that treatment plants do not remove all of the pathogens or nutrients before discharge. Many countries have implemented safeguards to protect shellfish from the impacted water discharge. One such approach is to implement distance and dilution safeguard between pollution sources and the shellfish. The further away you are from the source, there is generally an increase in dilution and increases the likelihood of having clean water. The second is to improve wastewater treatment plant efficiency. The goal is to remove pathogens and to reduce nutrients. The challenge is that many treatment plants do not function to the same level of efficiency. Scientists from the US, in collaboration with Canadian counterparts, performed the first quantitative norovirus risk assessment for oysters. This manuscript describes those factors that have the greatest impact on shellfish safety. This manuscript also describes possible solutions to improve shellfish safety while reducing the load of nutrients being discharged into the environment that would also reduce the rate of estuary eutrophication. Thank you very much for your time and listening. Have a great day.
I want to thank Matthew Grable and the University of Alabama at Birmingham, as well as all of the organizers for making this happen. In the spirit of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science and Sustainable Development, we at Medical Impact would like to urge ministers and heads of state across the world to remember the strength and bravery when responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. A tragedy that today represents an enormous loss of human life across the world. However, global efforts led to gigantic actions never seen before in human history. Supply chains so massive and delivered so fast to prevent further death. I can only imagine the biblical proportions this crisis would achieve without our oceans. I can only imagine what type of future we can expect if we do not listen to science while climate change shapes the future of what we could be the last generations on Earth. While Medical Impact vaccinates thousands of people a year, there are no vaccines for the ocean. There will be no cure, and there is no coming back. Member states should turn commitments into actions urgently, and this is our chance as civil society to raise our voices. Human health is directly related to environmental and animal health, all strongly dependent of ocean health. WHO's One Health initiative teaches us about the strong interlinkage and interdependence of SDG 3 and SDG 14. We will never achieve universal health coverage without our ocean health. We will never stand a true chance against poverty and hunger if our ocean acidification continues to rise. vulnerating food chains, generating famine across nations and disease with it. Today, more than ever, should we invest in our future, invest in research and development. Face masks are appearing at the bottom of the oceans and microplastics in our bodies. The time is up. COVID-19 was the lesson. There are mechanisms to finance global threats. There is political will to fight if global leaders are educated accordingly. There is a door wide open for multilateralism and international cooperation. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Megan Jumi Watsnapan, and I work for the Pew Charitable Trust. Pew is a global nonprofit organization whose mission is to strengthen and improve public policy, invigorate civic life, and provide the public with relevant data for decision-making. Today, I'd like to talk to you about how plastics can impact human health and about our work to prevent plastic pollution. Plastic has become ubiquitous on store shelves and in our homes. From wrapped food and disposable bottles to microbeads and body washes, it's used widely as packaging and in products because it's versatile, cheap, and convenient. But this convenience comes with a price. Plastic waste is entering the ocean at a rate of about 11 million metric tons a year. That's roughly equivalent to one rubbish truckload of plastic entering the ocean every minute. If we continue along a path of business as usual, there would be nearly 3 times as much plastic going into the ocean per year by 2040, leading to a buildup of 4 times the amount of plastic already in the ocean now. Plastic can have numerous human health impacts throughout its life cycle, from the impacts of raw material extraction to the production of plastic products themselves, to the chemicals in food packaging and the mismanagement of the waste generated. At the end of its life, over 40% of plastics is mismanaged globally. This mismanaged waste can create various health issues. Many communities throughout the world use open burning to get rid of their plastic waste. This transfers the pollution burden to the air, emitting toxic chemicals, particulates, and greenhouse gases. Mismanaged waste can also clog rivers and lead to flooding, or serve as vessels for breeding disease-carrying organisms like mosquitoes. While plastics are in use, PBTs and other endocrine-disrupting chemicals have been shown to leach into the food and drink in plastic containers. Recently, there have been several studies and news articles highlighting the fact that microplastics have been found in our bodies, in our organs, and in our bloodstream. It is still unknown the extent to which plastics in our bodies could harm human health, and scientists are scrambling to understand this. In 2020, our team, along with Systemic, other thought partners, and a panel of 17 global experts, published a report, Breaking the Plastic Wave: Top Findings for Preventing Plastic Pollution, with an accompanying article published in the journal Science. The research in this report shows that we need to tackle the plastic problem across its entire life cycle urgently. Our results highlighted that we have the tools to cut annual flows of plastic into the ocean by about 80% in the next 20 years by applying existing solutions and technologies. However, there is no silver bullet to addressing the plastic problem. We need a suite of solutions addressing plastics from a number of angles, including reducing growth in plastic production and consumption, substituting some plastics with alternatives such as paper and compostable materials, designing products and packaging for recycling, expanding waste collection rates in middle and low-income countries, increasing recycling, and reducing plastic waste exports. Addressing the plastic pollution problem will help achieve UN Sustainable Development Goal 14, Life Below Water, as well as many other UN Sustainable Development Goals, ranging from reducing greenhouse gas emissions, creating jobs through expanding recycling and improving waste collection, building sustainable communities, fostering responsible consumption, and improving good health and well-being, for example, by reducing exposure to toxins and chemicals from plastic production and open burning of plastic waste. A system-wide approach to reducing plastic pollution will provide many environmental, social, and economic benefits, and significant reduction is achievable within one generation. I welcome your questions, and please feel free to follow up with me after the webinar. Thank you.
Bonjour. Merci tout d'abord à l'Université de l'Alabama, à la Birmingham School of Public Health. Merci donc à Mathieu qui a associé Surfrider Fondation Maroc à cet événement. Je suis Noureddine Salouk et je suis président de la Fondation Surfrider Maroc. Notre mission s'oriente sur la pollution plastique. Surfrider Fondation Maroc s'est fixé 3 objectifs: sensibiliser, protéger, informer. Sensibiliser à travers un programme éducatif appelé Classe Bleue, qui termine sa 10e édition cette année, en partenariat avec la direction provinciale du ministère de l'Éducation nationale. Plus de 18 000 élèves ont été sensibilisés jusqu'à aujourd'hui. Un projet de sciences participatives, Initiative Océane, initié par Surfrider Foundation Europe et que nous développons au Maroc. Il s'agit de collecte de déchets sur les plages, les lacs et les rivières, et c'est aussi une collecte de données qui passe par une caractérisation précise des déchets. Le plastique représente la grande majorité. Osparito, un protocole de Surfrider Foundation Europe, lancé sur le continent africain avec Surfrider Foundation Maroc, en mars 2022 à Essaouira au Maroc. Les remontées des données des premières collectes sur 2 zones montrent la présence de 89 et 93% de plastique dans les déchets collectés. Deuxième objectif de Surfrider, protéger. Protéger grâce à nos projets d'entretien de plage soutenus par des acteurs économiques privés, à l'image de notre opération Ensemble, protégeant les océans, sur la plage de Tifnit, et l'opération J'aime ma plage, qui verra sa 11e édition se réaliser cet été sur 5 plages au nord d'Agadir. À titre d'exemple, lors de la dernière édition en 2021, sur 48 jours d'opération de nettoyage des plages, 80 tonnes de déchets ont été collectés. Le PET représentait 3183 kilos. 10% de ces 83 tonnes ont été recyclées. Agadir, première destination balnéaire qui se situe au sud du Royaume du Maroc, et la convergence de 5 oueds qui entraînent à chaque épisode pluvieux un afflux de déchets de tout genre, mais surtout de type plastique. Une étude récente réalisée par le laboratoire des systèmes aquatiques, environnement marin et continentaux de la faculté des sciences de l'université Ibn Zor à Agadir, alerte sur la présence massive de microplastiques sur 7 plages de la préfecture d'Agadir. Toujours selon cette étude, 4 formes de microplastiques ont été retrouvées sur les plages d'Agadir. Fibres, fragments, films et pastilles. Les fibres étaient les plus abondantes, représentant ainsi 73% du total des déchets. Nous avons signé en février 2022 un partenariat avec l'université Ibn Zor, qui couvre toute la région du sud du Maroc. Surfrider Foundation Maroc apporte son savoir-faire dans le domaine de la protection des océans et en échange, nous avons accès aux résultats des recherches conduites par les laboratoires de l'université. Un partenariat au service de la protection de l'océan.
Global plastics production has quadrupled over the last 40 years, and plastic production is expected to double by 2040. Only 9% of all plastics ever produced have been recycled, and 12% have been incinerated. 79% of all plastics produced have accumulated in landfills or in the environment. We need to think about plastics differently if we're to act effectively and with urgency. 80% of marine plastic pollution comes from land-based sources. Plastic pollution is present in the biotic and abiotic components of all ecosystems. It flows freely across jurisdictional boundaries, carried by wildlife, tidal flows, freshwater and atmospheric systems. It acts together with other environmental and social stressors, such as climate change, biodiversity loss, human health and human rights, to cause far greater damage than if plastic production or pollution occurs in isolation. The physical and chemical properties of plastics interact with other chemicals, materials and biota, creating novel ecosystems as well as environmental, biosecurity and human health hazards. Irreversible compounding and planetary scale exposure to plastics and associated toxicants is occurring. The planetary boundary for chemical pollutants has now been exceeded, and better risk management, monitoring and reduction in the harmful production and release of pollutants, including plastics, are urgently needed. The full life cycle of plastics, from extraction to disposal, impact the fundamental human rights of peoples and communities all over the world, including the right to the enjoyment of a healthy environment, the right to physical and mental health, the right to food, water, and an adequate standard of living and effective remedy. As a product of global inequalities, vulnerable groups are more likely to be exposed to hazards associated with plastics, whilst facing limited access to protective services and the resources needed to build resilience to respond and to resist. Plastics contain more than 10,000 toxic chemicals. Many of these are endocrine disrupting chemicals which are unsafe at extraordinarily low doses in parts per million or trillion. These toxicants are used extensively across the life cycle of plastics and can cause a wide range of diseases, including cancer, diabetes, and reproductive disorders. The most hazardous of these are dioxins, which are emitted from incineration and waste-to-energy technologies where plastics are used as feedstocks. When plastics are manufactured, recycled, and combusted, additional toxic substances are formed in the form of NIOS. Plastics and their chemicals contaminate food systems and food chains. They mobilize persistent organic pollutants, pathogens, and invasive species. And many bio and bio-based plastics contain these endocrine disrupting chemicals and present similar bio and eco hazards to traditional fossil fuel-based plastics. Only Goal 14 of the SDGs specifically addresses the impacts of plastic pollution, but as a global transboundary, systemic and interrelational threat, plastic pollution indirectly and directly impacts all SDGs. Failing to treat plastic pollution as a threat multiplier will undermine the implementation of all SDGs. Given predicted increases in plastic production, multinational corporations and states will need to make extraordinary efforts to prioritise investment in preventative and precautionary measures to cap virgin plastic production, develop safe, toxic-free, just and regenerative system solutions, and to remediate already contaminated ecosystems. If we're to see a comprehensive and effective plastic pollution treaty by 2024, the full and meaningful participation of those most vulnerable to plastic pollution must be prioritised in international negotiations and in local decision-making.
Hello, everybody. This is Yanxu Zhang, and I'm from Nanjing University of China. Today, I'd like to talk about one of our recent studies about COVID-19 and plastic waste and its impact on the global ocean. So the COVID-19 has become one of the most severe disasters in public health in human history. The pandemic has caused about 500 million cases, 6 million deaths globally, and profoundly changed our lifestyle. Today, I will talk about its impact on plastic waste. The reason is because the plastic products are so widely used in our daily life, and especially fighting for the coronavirus. Medical waste is generated for in-hospital patients. Personal protection equipment is also widely used by citizens all over the world. However, the management of this plastic waste could not necessarily catch up, and the surge of cases also poses big challenges for the waste management sector for different cities in both developing and developed countries. So this has caused a portion of the plastic waste associated with COVID-19 is directly released to the environment, including our ocean. According to a study of Oceans Asia, there is more than 1.5 billion face masks enter the marine environment in 2020. Our study is built based on this previous estimate, but systematically evaluated the plastic waste generated associated with the COVID, including the hospital medical waste for COVID-19 patients, the COVID test kits, the personal protection equipment used by citizens. As I mentioned before, social distancing and the lockdown also increased the online shopping, which also caused more plastic waste. So we estimate that as of August 23rd, 2021, there was an excess of 8.4 million tons of plastic waste was generated because of the COVID-19. Among them, we found the hospital waste, medical waste is the largest contributor, especially in developing countries. Based on the COVID cases in different countries and the hydrological information, we also estimated the amount of mismanagement plastic waste that enters the ocean. We found that about 25,000 tons of the plastic waste enters the ocean as of 2021. As we show in the picture here, these emissions happens over populous regions with big rivers all over the world. We can also see different spatial patterns for different sources. For example, hospital waste discharge is the highest over South Asia, South America, Western Europe, and also North America, while packaging and the PPE, also personal protection equipments, are the highest over the Asian countries. Finally, we also predict the transport and the freight of this plastic waste in the global ocean, we find that a large portion of the plastic waste is buried in the coastal environment in the sediment. Ocean currents also bring the plastic to the centers of oceans and form scavenge patches in a few years. By the end of the century, we will see the plastic waste is largely decreased, but can also be found in some ocean basins. Ocean sediment is also an important sink for these plastics. Our results indicate that the impact of plastic waste from COVID-19 on the global ocean is long-lasting. Although fighting COVID-19 is a top priority of many countries, better management of the medical waste and improving the related infrastructure are also urgently needed. Okay, I will stop here and thanks very much for your attention. Please contact me if you have any further questions. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our talk. This is the state of the science of microplastics. My name is Gaston Casillas, and I made this presentation with Greg Zares, and we're from the NCEH ATSDR of the CDC in the US, and we're part of the microplastics working group. So what are microplastics? So there is no official definition, but the generally accepted definition amongst people working on in the field right now is any plastic with at least one of its dimensions measuring less than 5 millimeters. That's either length, width, or height. So for example, that picture on the far right, that is a microplastic fiber, and it is defined as such because one of the measurements is less than 5 millimeters. So there's two kinds of microplastics that get into the environment that we really care a lot about. One are primary microplastics. That is a microplastic that's classified because it was made purposefully to be that size. A lot of times industry does this with things like microbeads. The other kind of microplastic we see in the environment are secondary microplastics. And those are what people tend to think of when they think of microplastics. And that is plastics that are broken down through a variety of different mechanisms into microplastics. So you start with the plastic bag in the ocean, then the waves pound it against the rock, that breaks off into a tiny little piece of plastic that's less than 5 millimeters. Now you have a secondary microplastic. Okay, so what we did at the CDC was we were interested in trying to figure out, first of all, what does literature say? So we conducted on microplastics. So we conducted a scoping review in 2020 to better understand sort of just the field of literature and what people were talking about with microplastics. So here we learned that there was no definition for microplastics, but we also learned a few other things. Now these graphs on the right of the screen are from a student who helped us with that microplastic review, scoping review. And here were some of her results of the literature and how it fell into categories that we made. The biggest takeaway for us, at least, is that water was by far the largest category for microplastics research. Everyone's looking at microplastics in water. That's fresh water, oceans, glaciers. Everyone's looking at microplastics in water. The next biggest category was sediment, followed very, very farly by food, and then air and atmosphere. So based on those preliminary scoping review results, we started conducting, or we are currently conducting, 2 systematic reviews. Now, the first systematic review is microplastics in water and human exposure. So basically, how are people being exposed through the medium of water? And that's being conducted by the NCEH, half of our microplastics working group. And then our ATSDR half is working on airborne microplastics and human exposure systematic review, trying to predict or conduct, to see how much, what a dose might look like in different environments. Okay, so this paper was written by Greg Zares et al. And published in 2021. And it kind of goes over the papers in the literature that gave specific exposure values. And they found a bunch. So they found microplastics exposures through the air, through tap water, through seafood, through various beverages such as tea and plastic water bottles, even to things like sugar. This is a chart from that paper. And if in the chart, a green color indicates there's good data for it, sufficient data. Yellow indicates that there's data gaps required to solidify that route of exposure. And then red means we have no data for it, or there was none at the time. So here you can see that microplastics in the air, there was direct evidence. There's seafood, drinking water, again, seasoning, salt, sugar, honey. So there's there's microplastics in a lot of things that we are also exposed to. The study also looked at endpoints. So these are studies where people were exposed to microplastics and where did the microplastics end up? Again, green is good data, yellow is data gaps, red is next to no data. There was good data showing microplastics in lung from occupational studies, as well as microplastics impacting the immune system, again, occupational studies. The rest of the chart, there is potential evidence. There were papers showing certain aspects, but we need to do a lot more research to figure out the actual endpoints of these microplastics once in the body. So two quick takeaways from this, just two specific takeaways. First, microplastics in feces. So this was a study published in 2019, and they took 8 healthy people from Europe and Asia, aged 33 to 65, who provided stool samples. All specimens of stool tested positive for microplastics. This isn't to say what caused the exposure, it's just to say that people were exposed. So this is a big deal. So we know people are being exposed, or at least we know in this study they are being exposed. We conducted our own study in-house, measuring air and inhalation. And what we did was we had a student take on and off a polyester shirt or sweater, and we had a little vacuum pump, and it would suction air, and we were trying to see how many microparticles in that little space. If you look right next to his collar, you see it hooked up there. In that little space, how much he might have potentially been exposed to just regular breathing in and out, taking off and on a sweater. We found microplastic fibers in every single one of our samples. So again, not conclusive, but more evidence leading to the fact that we're being exposed, and there's lots of different routes of exposure. So a brief summary, there's a lot of data gaps we need to fill in to better understand microplastic exposure and adverse health outcomes, or the potential adverse health outcomes that could come from this exposure. Some of the things we need to focus on are going to be how plastics behave in the environment. So not just that we're being exposed, but how are they moving through these different mediums? How are they breaking down in these different mediums? How are they being absorbed into different things such as food? We also need to understand, or to research rather, the different endpoints in the human body. Lungs are a really popular one right now, especially all the occupational studies, but there's so much more we need to look at. And so I hope this brief talk kind of, I guess, open your eyes to what we know about microplastics and the state of the literature right now. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. And here's my contact information. Have a great day.
I wish to thank all of our presenters thus far. We are also joined by 2 additional experts who will be joining us for the discussion section to begin in a moment. The first is Chris Clapp, who is associated with an environmental nonprofit called the Ocean Sewage Alliance. And the second is a colleague named Eddie Allison from a environmental NGO called WorldFish. And he's calling us from Malaysia, where I believe it's 1 in the morning now. So thank you for joining us at this late hour. Dr. Clapp and Dr. Allison, would either of you like to begin with a comment? And also, anyone watching this, please put a question in the Q&A box if you would like us to address it. We'll take questions in the order that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you everyone else for doing such great presentations. I'm the executive director for the Ocean Sewage Alliance. We are strictly focused on addressing that 80% of the world's sewage that enters the oceans untreated. I started as a marine scientist working on shellfish and seagrass restoration along the middle Atlantic coast of the United States. And all the data we were collecting from that, whether it was harmful algal blooms, nitrate concentrations within the leaf tissue of the eelgrass, or as many others spoke about before, contaminants that are harmful to marine life and contaminants that are harmful directly to human health. We're all pointing us into the watershed to do something. So here I am. I now lead a group that this is all we do. If anyone would like assistance or looking for information on how they could get started within their region to begin to better address the impacts of sewage on their coastal waters and by way of that, human health, I'm happy to be here as a resource for you all. This is really exciting. I don't want to replicate too much of what we've heard before, but the impacts that wastewater going into the oceans is a direct health impact. Either the blooms themselves, the bacteria in the wastewater, the toxins that the blooms consume, and even now we have some invasive seaweeds along the eastern coast of the US, Daisy siphonia, which is extremely toxic as it degrades on the beach. The hydrogen sulfide gas given off is extremely toxic to human health. So it's everywhere, it's all around us, and looking to assist in getting up to scale, helping people address this challenge.
Dr. Allison, do you have any remarks you'd like to share or questions you have for the other panelists?
Good evening, good morning. My name's Eddie Ellison. I'm from an organization called WorldFish. We're one of the consultative group on international agricultural research organizations. We're a non-profit who work on food and nutrition security and sustainable livelihoods. So not quite an environmental NGO, but environmental sustainability is obviously important, as we've heard, to sustaining human well-being, including nutrition and health. A big part of our work is focused on all of our work is focused on aquatic foods, and that's the diversity of plants, animals, and microorganisms that are utilized in the human food system, and indeed also in the livestock feed system. My colleague Shakuntala Thilsted, who last year was the recipient of the World Food Prize for her work on the nutrition benefits and contributions of small fish, describes aquatic foods as superfoods because of the diversity of nutrients that they contain. And they're superfoods because not only do they contain a diversity of important key micronutrients, including omega-3s and vitamin B12, which are not sourced from many other sources, but the minerals and vitamins that they contain are highly bioavailable compared to most other sources. And it's the diversity of aquatic foods that provides the diversity of nutrients in diets. If you sourced micronutrients from the small number of species that we farm and the animal source foods that we consume, you'd have to consume a lot more of them than if you consume a smaller quantity of a diverse set of foods. So consuming aquatic foods is an environmentally efficient way of sourcing micronutrients in global diets. We've heard a lot about the risks, I think, in the previous presentations that aquatic foods face. As of a year or so ago, Harvard Institute of Public Health was still advising that on balance, the benefits, the nutrition benefits for pregnant women for consuming seafood outweighed the potential health risks. And that was in very specific reference to mercury, but we've seen a whole range of other contaminants. And obviously this is a key concern. And I'd like to point out in that context that, the use of natural waters for food production is a major incentive for improving water quality. And so I think efforts to kind of separate food production from natural waters, for example, calls for banning fishing and these kinds of things, actually attack that incentive, that key incentive to maintain water quality. We've heard from Surfers Against Sewage and others that maintaining recreational water quality is a key incentive for maintaining ocean health, but so too is food production in those waters. So we've also, however, seen a chronic, in fact, an order of magnitude underinvestment in aquatic foods relative to other parts of the food system, despite it recently being identified as one of 7 priority agricultural investments, research and development investments. We have the solutions, we don't yet have the level of investment. And a call to the ocean to support ocean food systems as a priority will probably resonate quite well at an oceans conference like this. But now this community needs to take the voices that we've just heard, have to also be heard in public health arenas, in food system policy dialogues, for us to really sort of advance the cause of ocean conservation for improved health. And it's fantastic to see people already engaged in the public health arena here today to take that forward. Thank you very much.
All right, we have one question in the Q&A that I'd like to direct first to Megan from Pew. Can you possibly indicate alternatives to plastic containers? What are other things that people could do if they wanted to reduce their plastic footprint?
Hi, thank you for the question. And that's a really important one. I think we all need to work as individuals to reduce our plastic footprint. And I think what that'll look like will really depend on your community and the resources that are available to you. Some options are, bringing your own container to bulk bins, looking for stores that offer that. Obviously, that's not available to everyone. So what Pew is really advocating for is a system-wide change where we are asking businesses and policymakers to offer better delivery systems where people can have access to things like that. What we need to do to reduce plastics throughout our system is really look at the entire plastics chain, of which the consumer is really one part. And so while as consumers, we definitely have a role to play, I think we really need to look at all actors across the board to come together to reduce plastics. So on an individual level, yes, absolutely. Bring in your cloth tote bags, try to find bulk bins, try to find those products that do use less plastic. But as a community, we should be advocating for better systems where it makes it easier for us to do that.
I think that's an excellent point about the need for systems level responses. And I'd like to ask Dr. Farley from Massey University in New Zealand if she can expand a little on that thought.
Thank you for the opportunity, kia ora koutou. Yeah, I'd like to just really kind of double down on what Megan has just offered there as well. But I do a lot of work in the Pacific Islands here in Oceania. There are a lot of really wonderful traditional alternatives that that communities are bringing back. So I'm not sure where the question came from, which community, but certainly in terms of organic materials, leaves for packaging, and woven bags instead of plastic bags. Certainly the reuse, refill, repair kind of approach at the top of the zero waste hierarchy is where we really want to be heading. But I just wanted to also sort of echo what Megan was saying too, that quite often, particularly vulnerable communities are really burdened with the responsibility for reducing their waste, when actually it's more of a macro structural issue. It's a global systems, it's a market issue. And so I would also encourage communities to kind of push up a little bit to the powers that make decisions around this, either locally, regionally or internationally, if they have the potential, if they have the ability to voice their needs to reduce plastics in ways that they can't do locally, in order to change things at a higher sort of power superstructural level as well. But certainly reduction, prevention, refill systems, repair, right to repair systems, product stewardship, encouraging local businesses, national corporations to support is where I think we should also be heading. Kia ora.
We have another question regarding chemical safety and a combination of how do we design more healthy products so they contain less toxic chemicals, and what are some of the agenda setting things we can do for informing research to be more proactive about preventing toxics. So Dr. Junglenga, if you are able to talk a little bit about how the NIH does stakeholder consultation to ensure that oceans and other programs are responsive to community needs, I think that would respond to this question.
Yeah, speaking from the extramural grant administering side of things, we're definitely encouraging our grantees to look at strategies to improve the throughput of studying lots and lots of chemicals kind of at the same time, to prioritize based on toxicity and try to get the information out ahead as companies are trying to replace their product manufacturing lines with some of these replacement chemicals. At NIEHS, we have a separate division that's called the National Toxicology Program, and they're also working on strategies to do that. And they do engage with some of our other agencies in the USA who, like the EPA and the FDA, to identify what those priorities could be. We definitely have a long way to go. I think Jeff's question is just really great. It's really hard to do that because at least on the US side of things, our policies aren't necessarily keeping up with all of those replacements getting filtered in. So, I mean, from the research side of things, just try to identify strategies to get more toxicity information faster that is reliable and translatable to human health.
Thank you so much. We are unfortunately now at the end of our allotted time. I'm going to do one more quick comment on the way out, but I wanted to just thank all of you very much for your time, both in preparation for this event and at present on this panel. I invite people to reach out to, you can contact me or you can contact individual speakers who provided their contact information if you have questions after this event. And thank you everyone for your time today. Dr. Fleming, I think one of the things that you mentioned briefly during your talk that I'd like to kind of end on is that the ocean also, in addition to being a vehicle for harms, is an opportunity for people to do well, to thrive. And if you can talk a little bit about the benefits of the ocean for mental health or for nutrition, I think that would be an uplifting way to end this session.
Thank you for this opportunity to hopefully end this session on a high note, because I think we heard about a lot of the risks. I think the kind of research that my colleagues and I around the world have been doing, it basically says that we need to preserve the ocean's health selfishly for our own health and well-being. That if you have equitable access, in other words, that everyone in the world can access high quality marine and coastal environments, we now have evidence that that will both treat and improve and prevent physical and mental illness. So I think it behooves all of us to think about that. If we needed a selfish reason to take care of the ocean, that's it. And then I think a lot has been said about the whole benefits of seafood, much more eloquently than I by other colleagues on this panel. And also there's many other areas of reasons to take care of the oceans, things like drugs and other things from the sea that we can develop from the sea. To the extent that we are losing biodiversity, we are losing opportunities in that. And of course, areas such as renewable energy, transport, if we could make it more sustainable, et cetera. I think it's important to frame the ocean and its effects on human health in a positive light, not just negative, because there is a real risk that we will alienate people. So I personally think it's an important agenda to do what people have already done on this call, on this webinar, to say, here are things that you can do as an individual in your communities and in speaking to your policymakers, both locally and globally. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And it's really been a wonderful experience to hear all of my colleagues talk about so many aspects that are important to ocean and human health.
Thank you. And thank you to the very patient, long-suffering people who joined us for the panel and did not actually talk during it. We still appreciate your time very much. If you are able to respond to questions that come in email in the coming days, I'm sure that people would appreciate it. And with that, I'd like to formally adjourn. Thank you all very much for your time.